Wednesday. This is your Wednesday word. My name is Shaniqua Risher. I'm going to come to you today with just a quick word, something that God has given me. I, so last week I did this on multiple platforms, and I'm trying to do it again this week. So you'll see me looking down and you'll see me looking here. Just go with the message. It's not about where I'm looking. It's not about my face. It's not about any of that. Just go with the message. But I'm also going to be relying heavily on my notes today because I wrote a lot. So thank you guys so much for those who are joining me. It is at 12 o'clock. I do ask that if you don't mind, please share this message. If you are right now here on the live, go ahead and share that. If you want to put comments in the screens, I may or may not see them. Sometimes I see them and then I can acknowledge you. Sometimes I don't because I'm so caught up in the message. But then also my eyesight is not necessarily the best, so I have to do all of this if I'm trying to lean in to read something. So just know if I don't respond to a comment, that really truly is the reason why. Most likely it's because I'm caught up in delivering something, but also because my eyesight is not as great as it could be or as I would like it to be. But thank you guys so much for joining me for this Wednesday word. If you joined me last week, again, I was streaming on multiple platforms and the word was on perpetually waiting. And I kind of announced what the word today was going to be on because it was something that just truly had been on my spirit for so long. And it actually came from a song that I heard. And so, again, please share this message with those who may or may not be online right now with you. If it touches you, share it. I appreciate it. But let's go ahead and get started because it's 12:01. So it's a minute after 12. And I want to make sure I'm respectful of people's time. So, as I stated, this particular message is rooted in a song. I don't know about you guys, but when I hear music, it speaks to my soul so many different times. It can communicate in ways that I'm not able to communicate in, and it could be anything. I love all music, from rap to country to gospel to trap. I love all music, but gospel music definitely communes with me. It enters me into the presence of the Lord, and it allows me to, it speaks for me in moments that I'm not able to speak for myself. And so I heard this particular song called Grave Clothes, and it's by Maverick City Music and Tribal, which is TRIBL. And so when I first heard it a couple of weeks ago, it had been out, I think, since 2021 or early 2022. I can't remember right now. But when I heard it, it was my first time hearing it. And I was like, how have I never heard this song? Because I love Maverick City Music. And when I listened to the song, it floored me. I can't tell you how it floored me. And so the name of the song, the title of the song is the same title of today's message, which is called Grave Clothes. And when I heard the song, I promise you, and I kid you not, since then, I probably have listened to this song at least 600 times. And I am not exaggerating. There is not an exaggeration. I literally keep it on loop. I listen to it every day. I've listened to it in my car just because it really just spoke to me so much and took me to such a place. Funny story. I remember the day that we were burying my father. My friends and I, we were all in the car. And so we were driving from Dallas to the country, which is where my father was born and where my family is from. And so we were driving to the country, which is where he was going to be buried. And I had Oceans on by Hillsong on repeat. And so if those who know that song, it's like 8.5, 9 minutes long, but I had it on repeat for like an hour and a 15-minute drive. So at the end, my friends were like, Shaniqua, are we going to have to listen to this song again? Because they were so wanted to be respectful because I was in the midst of grieving, but at the same time, they were tired of that song. So I tell you that story because, again, I can listen to a song over and over and over again. And that's what I've done with this particular song, Grave Clothes, because it spoke to me so much. And so the title of today's message is Grave Clothes, and it is based on a song. And I'm going to read the lyrics in a little bit further into the message, but it's based on a song by Maverick City Music and Tribal. And I encourage you to listen to the song if you can once this message is over. So I'm reading today from John chapter 11, verses 38 through 44. And I'm reading from the NIRV version. And it is let's go ahead and get started. So it states, once more, Jesus felt very sad. He came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone in front of the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad smell. Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. Then Jesus says, didn't I tell you, if you believe, you will see God's glory? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and he said, Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here. I said it so they will believe that you sent me. Then Jesus called in a loud voice and he said, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out. His hands and feet were wrapped in straps of linen. A cloth was around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the clothes he was buried in and let him go. And so again, today's message is called grave clothes. And so let's talk about that. And so many times in life, I have fought so many battles where I felt that I fought them alone and in the dark. Battles where I felt that the pain was too much, the loneliness was too much, the fear that I was experiencing was too much. And there have been battles where the grave clothes that I have worn have threatened to take me under and to keep me buried and lifeless. And just when I thought the situation was unbearable, just when I thought that I couldn't do it anymore, just when I realized that it was loneliness that was crushing me because I was in the battle, in the fear, in the pain by myself, I realized that I was not. And the tomb and the grave where I was that was suffocating me, I realized I was not alone and that God was there with me, that the Lord was there with me. And in the midst of that, he was calling me forward. And so the beautiful thing when we start to look at this particular book and we look at the book of John, we're being told a remarkable story in John chapter 11 of Jesus resurrecting Lazarus. But what's so interesting about this story is that Jesus could have healed Lazarus if he actually would have just showed up in the midst of his sickness, if he would have left what he was doing and visiting Lazarus on his deathbed, on his sick bed. But instead, prior in the chapter, and I want to encourage you to read all of John chapter 11, instead, Jesus said, this sickness is not unto death. It is for the Son of God to get glory. And so with this, we know that Martha had faith, Mary had faith, which were the sisters of Lazarus, and we presumably think that Lazarus had faith. So they had faith that Jesus could heal Lazarus from on his sickness where he wouldn't die. But instead, we see that they enter into this phase with Lazarus, with Jesus, where they enter into the grief and grave without the presence of the Lord. So let's go ahead and go even deeper and talk about this. So when you look at the song and when I heard it and it calls grave clothes, what are grave clothes? So grave clothes are burial shrouds, which are pieces of cloth and strips that were wrapped around a deceased person. And it's the practice of presenting them and preparing them for the tomb, for the grave. And so Lazarus, after he succumbed to whatever sickness he had, he was prepared for death and he was wrapped in these grave clothes. His hands were bound, his feet were bound, his face was covered up. He was prepared for death, put into a situation that so much so restricted him from moving if he was alive. But we know that Lazarus was dead and he was prepared for this dead situation, and that it was something that would restrict him if he was alive. But if we look at his particular text, Lazarus was called forth. And so what does that mean with the grave clothes? Did they serve a purpose anymore? And so many times when we look at our lives, and I even myself, we look at our lives that we are bound by something that at one point in time served a particular purpose. It could be our defense mechanisms that prepared us for one stage of life but we're no longer in that stage of life. But how do we let those things go? When I was talking to my friend a couple of weeks ago and I sent her this song, she was like, I hadn't heard this song before either. And I was like, this is my new mantra for 2023. She was like, but what grave clothes do you have, Shaniqua? And that was a very interesting question to ask someone. And I was like, my grave clothes, I was like, my grave clothes are fear. My grave clothes happen to be, let's see if my grave clothes is fear. My grave clothes are those things that bind me from living, because at one particular point in time I protected myself. So I've had the grave clothes of control, of controlling spirit. I've had that. I struggle with that even now with myself, to protect myself, because I don't think that God can protect me. In moments I felt that in the past. Now I know differently, but I still struggle with that controlling spirit that's within me, not to control others per se, but to control others' interaction with me, and how I protect myself from hurt and fear and things along those lines. And so those defense mechanisms that I built up at one point in my life no longer serve me with a particular purpose right now. And then unknowingly, if we look at grave clothes, that we also start to accept things that other people put on us, or that we put on ourselves, those limitations that eventually restrict us from growth and transformation and keep us in bondage. And so when we look at grave clothes, we understand that grave clothes can represent many things. Again, for me, grave clothes are fear, unbelief, doubt, and the spirit of control. But grave clothes can also be our past. It can be shame, all of the things that we are bound by, that have served us in one particular season within our life, that have restricted us. Because again, Lazarus was prepared for death, but Jesus showed up and he was calling Lazarus forth. And so the grave clothes that Lazarus had on no longer served this purpose. And so, can you only imagine that Lazarus hears this voice? He hears the voice of Jesus calling to him and telling him to come forth and to come out. And can you imagine Lazarus waking up in a dark place in a tomb, shrouded in grave clothes? The last thing he remembered was dying, was living and being sick. And then he wakes up and he comes to himself and he finds himself in a tomb, in a grave, wrapped in the death shrouds, wrapped in grave clothes, because he was essentially buried. But yet and still, excuse me, my phone keeps ringing and I put it on do not disturb, but it's my family. But yet and still, with Lazarus, he was in that tomb. He was wrapped in his grave clothes, but Jesus just said that, hey, I want you to be able to come out. And so Jesus conquered Lazarus' death and called him from his tomb, because there was more life yet to live. And so with there being more life yet to live with Lazarus, this is when I want to be able to talk about this particular song that is so important to me, and has spoken to me so much. So these are the lyrics of the song, again, Grave Clothes by Maverick City Music. And it says, walked out of my grave clothes and I came out in a new robe. I was buried there for too long. Now I come alive in the one who has conquered it all. He breathed in me, made these dry bones come alive. He conquered death. Oh, he breathed in me, made these dry bones come alive. He conquered death. Because he did it, I can do it too. And so when I look at this, I have the question that I want to ask all of you guys. What grave clothes are you wearing that no longer serve you, that was purposeful in one season, but that not necessarily the season that you're occupying right now? What has Jesus is effectively calling you out of, from your tomb, from your grave? Is it regret? Is it bitterness? Is it the memory of your past? Is it the wrong that's been done to you? Is it shame? Are any of those things serving who you are right now? What grave clothes are you encased in that has restricted your growth, has restricted everything about where you are trying to be, that no longer serve you? And so when we look at this particular scripture, we recognize that Jesus was calling Lazarus to come alive. He was causing Lazarus to come out of this particular of grave that he was in, because he was no longer, literally no longer dead. He was no longer in this dead situation, but he was calling him to life. But a part of calling him to life, Lazarus was shrouded. But the beautiful thing here is that we see that Lazarus did two things. And then Jesus commanded others to do something when it comes to Lazarus. Lazarus came forward and said, Jesus said to Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus then came out of the grave. And so with that, we recognize that Lazarus responded to Jesus's command, and that he responded to everything that Jesus told him to. But to be freed from the graves, Lazarus had to respond to the command to be able to come forth, and he was an active participant in his own deliverance from the tomb. But then Jesus looked at the crowd and told the crowd to remove the clothes from him. The crowd had to help Lazarus be able to come out and be freed from those situations. And so with that, what are you doing? Who in your life God has sent to you to be able to help you come out of your dead situation where you are? What has Jesus shown where he wants to call you forward to a new place? We're recognizing that you have been in this place of bondage, of restrictions. You have effectively been in grave clothes and dead. And so I just want to tell you my own personal testimony from where I am right now. So I have made a conscious thought and effort to relinquish the spirit of control and fear in my life. When my friend asked me earlier this month, when I sent her the song, and she was like, what is it that you feel that you need to let go of and come out of? I immediately knew it was fear. I immediately knew it was self-doubt. I immediately knew it was the spirit of control and all of those things that try to keep me in bondage from what my full and unlimitless life, or excuse me, full and limitless life that Christ has called me to. So I recognize what my grave clothes have been, and I have been working at this for years. It's not anything that I started on this year or last year or the year before. I have been working on this for years. I read books that challenge my thinking, that challenge my thought process. I meet with a therapist when I need to process things in my life. I pray, I fast, I study his word, I spend time with him. Those are actions that I have implemented because I want to make sure I am no longer bound by grave clothes. And so I want to encourage you, and I want to speak to you for those who feel that you are covered by grave clothes. I want to be able to tell you that you can take those things off. You can remove the burial shroud. You can go and have other people help you take off those grave clothes. This year, if you haven't started that process to your healing, to you living life to the fullest, whatever God has for you, you can do it right now. He is calling you to come out of that dead situation. He is calling you to come out of that tomb. He is calling you to no longer be restricted by those things that bound you, because he has freed you. Respond to the command that Jesus has for you. I want to encourage you to take off the burial clothes, the grave clothes, because you've stayed in those clothes way too long. He is greeting you and calling you to something new. So again, when you look at it, I'm not going to sing it. I want to sing it, but I'm not going to sing it. But when you look at the lyrics of this song, walked out of my grave clothes and I came out in a new robe. I was buried there for too long. Now I come alive for the one who has conquered it all. He breathed in me, made these dry bones come alive. He conquered death. Oh, he breathed in me, made these dry bones come alive. He has conquered death. And because he did it, I can do it too. So if you understand the grave clothes that Jesus desires for you to let go, to walk out from, understand everything that he desires for you, the life that he desires for you. Again, it is not only for the situation, it's not for death, but it is for his his glory. Somebody needs to see and understand what it means to leave your grave clothes in the past. Someone needs to see and understand what it means to shake off fear. Someone needs to see and understand what it means to shake off the shame of your past or a situation that happened to you that has been restricting you from living and living life to the fullest measure of life, because Jesus has called you forth just as he calls Lazarus forth. Lazarus had on grave clothes, and those grave clothes served him for a specific situation. They served him in the tomb. But how do you know? How many of you know that that was not his death in that moment? That tomb was not where he was supposed to be in that moment. What he was prepared for, what others put on him, what he was in, no longer served that purpose. He had a new morning to face. That is the story of grave clothes. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to me this day. I know it said on Instagram, some of you guys couldn't hear. The phone was interrupting a lot. So I may end up doing this again on Instagram. I don't know. It just depends when I download this, if I can hear it or not. But for those who've joined me on YouTube and Facebook, I thank you so much for just allowing me this opportunity to share with you. I'm not trying to preach to anyone. I'm just trying to share the word. I'm trying to share the journey of life that I hope it will impact you, so that you too can cast off anything that is restricting you from living life to the fullness, so that you can go forward in the full measure of life that Christ has called you to. Take off your grave clothes. Have a good day. Bye-bye.